as I'm filming this right now, it is New Year's Eve, and nothing happens more on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day that is better than football, right? I mean, right now, as I'm filming this, Kentucky just won their bowl game, the Belk Bowl in Charlotte, beating Virginia Tech in a come-from-behind victory. And interestingly enough, and I want to bore you with this if you're not a big football fan or a big UK football fan especially, but if you don't know their story, they lost a lot of their defensive players last season. And then on top of that, at the beginning of the season, their starting quarterback got injured, and then their second string quarterback got injured. And then they basically took a receiver and converted him to a quarterback and finished the season that way and won a lot of games that way. And it looked like an impossible situation. A lot of people were thinking that the Wildcats would have a so-so season, may or may not make a bowl game, ended up especially once the injuries happened, then people were saying there's no way this is not going to be good. But they ended up winning enough games to make a bowl and then won that bowl game. And it's just awesome. Now, sports are really fun because you can find some parallels with life. And one of the things we're talking about today is this idea of something being impossible. And that's really a big descriptor word when you think about it. Like when you call a situation or a circumstance impossible, that's saying something. And one of the cool things about sports, I remember as a kid just watching what they call the Hail Mary pass, where this team is going to lose. They just have one play left with seconds to go. Quarterback heaves it as hard as he can into the end zone, and then somehow, some way, a receiver catches it to catch the ball and win. Probably the most famous one of those I remember as a kid was watching Doug Flutie make that Hail Mary pass for Boston College to win their bowl game. It was pretty awesome, and I remember thinking there was no way that was going to win. In basketball world, we see those half-court shots to win the game. Just it seems impossible, and then when the impossible actually happens, it does something in us. We are excited, we're pumped, we're amazed, we're blown away. Videos go viral. There's something huge about that. Well, impossibilities are not new to humanity. If you read through scriptures, you'll see a lot of examples of some very impossible situations. And here is the big key truth about this session that I want you to just cling to as a group today, and that is that all things are possible with Him. All things are possible with God. That is the truth. And so as I'm making this video, we're getting ready to have our very first worship service, worship gathering for 2020. We're not starting off with an actual series right off the bat. This session really previews what I believe is going to be the theme for the entire year of 2020, that all things are possible with God. That's going to be our theme. We're going to just be praying for God to do the impossible. We're going to be expecting Him to do the impossible. We're going to take the impossibilities that we face and we're going to bring them to God and say, God, we trust you with these impossibilities. And we ask that you do what you want to do, that you glorify yourself in these circumstances and in these situations. One of the impossible situations that a family faced that Jesus encountered was a family that had a boy who from childhood had been possessed by an evil spirit. He was mute, he was deaf, he couldn't hear, he couldn't speak. And so in Mark chapter 9, we have the historical account of Jesus and his disciples encountering this family with this boy. Now, as it turns out, back in those days, in the first century, exorcisms weren't unusual, and many people knew how to perform them, not just people that were considered miracle workers. But as it turns out, one of the key abilities, one of the key circumstances that would allow you to perform an exorcism was learning the name of the evil spirit and calling that evil spirit by name and commanding that evil spirit to leave. Well, as it turns out, this boy being deaf and being mute because of the evil spirit rendered it impossible for an exorcism to be performed. And they had brought their boy with great hope to the disciples. Now, Jesus and 3 of his disciples happened to be up on a mountain and were not with the rest of the other 9 disciples. Jesus was with James, Peter, and John up on a mountain, and Jesus revealed to them his full glory in this experience that we call the Transfiguration. Jesus was literally transfigured to his glorified heavenly state before their eyes. And on top of that, Moses and Elijah showed up and had a meeting with Jesus right there in front of them. Jesus asked them to not tell anyone till after his resurrection from the dead, which they didn't fully understand what he was even saying. And as they came from that mountain to rejoin the disciples, they come upon some scribes of the law arguing with the disciples about this boy because they could not cast this evil spirit out of the boy. And so the family was super excited when Jesus shows up because they had heard about Jesus. Jesus' reputation had preceded him as a man who had done amazing things. And sure enough, as you can imagine, Jesus was able to command that evil spirit to depart from the boy. And the boy seemed like he was dead after the spirit convulsed him and then left him. But then he lifted the boy up and the boy was alive and well. An amazing miracle happened. Later on, the disciples privately asked Jesus, why could we not cast out that evil spirit? Which just once again tells us they expected they could. This wasn't like, oh, only Jesus can do this. We can cast out this evil spirit. Jesus' answer was this kind can only come out by prayer. And then some manuscripts of the New Testament include the word fasting as well, prayer and fasting. So what do we glean from this account? What do we glean from this encounter that Jesus had with this family? I'm reminded once again that with him, all things are possible. God can do anything. And though these disciples were not able to cast out this evil spirit, Jesus came along and could do it. And I'm just reminded there's no one like Jesus. There's no one like God. We can do it ourselves as much as we want to plan to do it ourselves. We can try to be as self-sufficient and organized and strategic and intentional and conjure up all the human spirit we can to accomplish things. And sometimes in life, we face an impossibility where the only answer is Jesus. And those are some of the most awesome times in our lives because with him, all things are possible. Not with us, not with our determination, not with our gusto, not with our talent, not with our abilities, but with him, all things are possible. And Jesus reminded everyone about that in this moment, but he also told them to do something. Basically, you got to pray more. But I don't want you to see this prayer thing that he asks for, and you can even include fasting in this conversation, as, oh, that's one of those spiritual boxes that I need to just check off and say, okay, cool, I did that. I did that. Again, so many times we make this about us, but the thing about prayer and even fasting, which is something that we'll have a session on later on in the year, but the whole point of that is connecting with God and relying on him. It's dependency upon God is what it amounts to. It's, if I can do the impossible because I can check off a spiritual box of things that I do, I still don't even need God. And I think that that's what Jesus was trying to tell these disciples is, this kind of situation. There's sometimes in life we face these kind of situations, these impossibilities, because the only way we're going to experience God doing the impossible, the only way we're going to get through this impossibility is with the strength and the power that can only come from God. And so this idea of praying more or fasting even is about us coming together in daily relationship with God so that when we face something that seems impossible, we can have stronger faith. I mean, Jesus said in that same passage, oh, faithless generation. It was almost like a frustration there. And faithless, that word, we often, modernize that to say, oh, that means we should be more faithful. No, it's another word would be, oh, unbelieving generation. Oh, self-sufficient generation. Oh, do-it-yourself generation. You have become so dependent upon yourself that you have no faith. You have no ability to trust and believe that I, your God, I, your creator, can actually do the impossible. It's one of the silver linings about facing impossibilities because they're not always fun things to face. One of the silver linings of facing them is it forces us to rely upon the strength and the power of God and depend on him completely. And when we do that, we get to see amazing things and we get to give him glory and we get to point other people to him And that's what it's all about. That's what our lives are all about. So we got some good discussion questions that your leader is going to guide you through that I think is going to also really dovetail well into a really cool time of prayer at the end of your small group session. And I know sometimes in small group sessions, it's easy to just kind of tag on prayer as that thing we do at the end. I hope that you'll see it differently with this session. Being reminded, based on what Jesus taught his disciples, that some impossibilities that you face, some difficult things you face, you're not going to get through it if you don't pray, if you don't pray more, if you're not more committed to prayer, if you're not connecting to me even more. And what's beautiful about the prayer time in a small group is it's a family of God's children together coming to the Father together, and it's a powerful thing. So enjoy some good discussion, enjoy some amazing prayer time, and start off this new year believing in 2020 that God is going to do the impossible.